questions and the issues that come up under the Ethics Act. It's very general in terms of what we go over. I do want to point out that what we go over today is the floor. It is not the ceiling. We always recommend that as you conduct yourselves in relation to your dealings with public officials and public employees, that you certainly strive to go beyond just the bare basics that we cover in this today. A good place to start is in the organization of our commission. The commission was established by the legislature in 1973, and we operate very similarly to other commissions in the state of Alabama. We've got very limited authority in what we can do. The members of our commission are appointed by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House. They serve staggered 5-year terms. Again, this is pretty consistent with what you see in state government across all commissions and agencies. The chair of our commission is John Plunk. He's a lawyer from Athens, Alabama. Justice Lynn Stewart is our co-chair, or vice chair rather. She is former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court and lives in Baldwin County, Alabama. Stan McDonald is a lawyer from Huntsville. And then our last commissioner is General Ed Kroll, who is a retired brigadier general from Maxwell. This is his second time to serve on the commission. But as with other commissions, they make all the formal decisions for the commission. They meet every 60 days. And I am the director of the staff of the commission. You will likely be dealing with the staff more than you will be dealing with our commissioners. In fact, it would surprise me if any of you have any formal dealings with any of our commissioners. If you do have dealings with our commissioners, then that means that you have some issue that has come before them to be addressed. It might be a formal advisory opinion, or it could even be an enforcement action, but that is the only time that you would see them. I like to point this out to you because the staff can be incredibly helpful to you. Chief among them would be Kayla Fail, who is our lobbyist liaison. Some of you have probably already talked to Kayla. I'd be shocked if all of you haven't already talked to Kayla. But if you have a question about something that arises in the course of your duties as a lobbyist, my advice to you is to contact Kayla first. Kayla can probably answer most of your questions. If she can't answer your questions, she will be able to direct you to the person within our office who can answer your question. So look at Kayla as your first line, so to speak, in terms of gathering information or answering questions for you that you may have. We do have the ability as a staff to give you opinions. We can do that in one of two ways. We can either give you an informal opinion or a formal advisory opinion. Now, many of you already know what these are, but a formal advisory opinion is a formal document that our commissioners vote on at their regularly scheduled meetings. We rarely take formal advisory opinions for lobbyists because honestly, y'all rarely ask questions that you want a formal advisory opinion for. We have done it, however, in a couple of cases. Generally, those formal advisory opinions for lobbyists have dealt with issues about reporting or how you can split expenses among various lobbyists. For example, if you're all participating in one event. Cynthia, my chief assistant, will talk about that in just a few minutes, some of the details about some of those specific opinions. But just know that what we do a lot for lobbyists is give informal opinions. An informal opinion is the staff answering a question that you may have that is easily answerable from the statute itself or something that we have formally given an opinion on before. And for y'all, what that usually looks like are variations of questions about the kind of events you can have, what you're allowed to give at these events to public officials or public employees, how you report, when you report, that sort of thing. So again, going back to my first point that I made, what I would love for you to feel comfortable doing is contacting Kayla in our office, or really anybody in our office, if you have specific questions about the mechanics of how you do your job. I need to speak briefly about the enforcement arm of our office. By statute, we do have limited enforcement obligations. In our office, if someone were to file a complaint against a public official, a public employee, or even a lobbyist, that complaint must be a written complaint filed in our office, signed by the person who is filing it, and supported by credible and verifiable information. Our complaint process is very limited. It is mandated by statute to look a certain way and be a certain way, which distinguishes us from other offices that do have the ability just to simply investigate issues that come to their attention. We have to have a formal complaint filed with us. And once that complaint is filed with us, we go through a process of review. We make sure that it states a violation of the Ethics Act. We make sure that it complies with the statutory requirements for a complaint. And if it does so, then we will assign it to our investigators. Our investigators have a very limited time in which they have to investigate. That time limit is 180 days, although they can get a one-time extension for additional time. And sometimes we have to do that, but the most a complaint can be filed and pending with us is 360 days. If we get through the investigative process and we as a staff determine that there is sufficient evidence to present it to our commissioners, we will do so in a formal meeting. If you have a case pending against you, you are mandated to be given notice of that and a summary of the charges against you. We have to comply with the discovery requirements and the rules of criminal procedure. There are administrative rules that govern our process before our commission. They are on our website. They are available for you to review if you do have a case, but we will inform you of those requirements when we discuss the case with you. But ultimately, that case will be presented to our commissioners, who would weigh the evidence and determine whether there's probable cause for a violation. The standard for probable cause, as many of you know, is whether it's more likely than not that there's been a violation. If they find that there has been, then they can refer it to the Attorney General's office or to the local DA for further investigation and possible prosecution. We also have the ability to issue fines in certain cases, and we do more of that than we do anything else. And those fines can be imposed if they are approved by, the ability to issue the fine is approved by either the Attorney General or the local DA. A number of our cases are dismissed. A lot of our cases are dismissed. I would go even so far as to say a majority of the cases filed with us are ultimately dismissed. But that is the enforcement arm of our office, so to speak. We do less of that than we do anything else. The advice giving function of our office is what we do more of. And it fits in with the overall point of our office, which is really to define the act, to educate about the violations in the act and also the restrictions and the allowances within the act in order to keep you out of trouble. And that's really what our office would like to be viewed as by you as you serve. The overall theme of the act is that public officials and public employees cannot use their official position for personal gain for either themselves, their family members, or a business they're associated with. Now, where lobbyists and principals are concerned, there are specific prohibitions that relate to you. Those are contained in Section 5.1 of our Act. This is what you have probably heard a lot more about when you have heard things about the Ethics Act, or certainly your position within the ethics scheme with state government, and that is the limitation on gift giving from lobbyists to public officials. So everybody who talks about it talks about that you can't give certain gifts to public officials. You can't invite them to certain functions that don't meet specific requirements. All of that is the land that you will be living in. So I'll tell you that the general prohibition is that you can't offer a thing of value to a public official or to a public employee. A thing of value is defined as any gift, it's not up there, but it's any gift, benefit, service, gratuity, offer of future employment. So it's things that typically have a monetary value that you can assign to it. Within or under that prohibition, however, there are 18 exceptions to it that are going to cover most of the occasions that you are going to want to give something to a public official. All of you know about the legislative receptions that groups have, the informational dinners that people have. All of those are allowed by the Ethics Act. And all of those are things that are pretty standard in state government. Now, I'll tell you that most lobbyists, most principals, when they want to have functions and they want to give certain things, certain items to public officials or public employees, they will write to our office or contact our office about what the limits are about what they can do. And I would certainly recommend that you do that if you find yourself in that situation. If you want to host an event, if you want to be part of a group that's hosting an event, just call us and ask us what the limitations are about that. You can apply for pre-certification for those events. That's probably a term that many of you are aware of if you've been around state government for any period of time. Pre-certification is our office's official approval of events that people have. So let's just say that the realtors want to have a legislative reception at Archives or at your own building. I guess that's on Washington's downtown. If you want to have an event there, you can write us. You can set out what the parameters of the event are going to be, who you're going to invite. You can ask us to pre-certify that event, and we can do that for you. That's a great help to you, I think, as you move forward, just simply going through the process of getting the pre-certification, because then the event has been certified as being compliant with the Ethics Act, and you can have your event, and you can move forward and not worry about whether you are committing a violation simply by hosting the event. If you are with a group that has not done this very often, in other words, you have not sponsored these kind of events, what I would recommend to you is to go on our website and look on our calendar that is under the pre-certification tab on our website. If you will do that, you'll see all of the events that we have pre-certified. You will also see the documents that were submitted in support of the request for pre-certification, and you can use those as models for how you want to conduct your event. So I think a lot of people who are just starting out find that to be a pretty big help, because it's almost like having a canned brief if you're a lawyer, or a canned form that you can fit into any number of circumstances. The kind of events that typically request pre-certification are large events where, for example, the entire legislature is invited. Those events look a certain way. Everybody knows what they look like, and everybody knows what to expect with those. You can give food, you can give basic hospitality in those, but those are basically receptions, and that's why they're called legislative receptions. However, a lot of events are much smaller than that. You can have dinners that have at least 12 people invited to it who you reasonably expect will attend. They have a diversity of views, and those are called widely attended events. You may have heard that. If you lobby in other jurisdictions, they're referred to as widely attended gatherings, but they're the same things. It's smaller groups of individuals who have a combined interest but different views who might discuss legislative issues. During the session, you will see groups invite two committees to a dinner that might be at a local restaurant. It might be at Central, it might be at Ravello, it might be any number of places. But they will invite them. There will be some informational component to it. There might be legislation that's coming up that's important to whoever is sponsoring it. And so they want to educate the public officials who are in attendance about what the proposed bill will accomplish, or maybe opposition they've got to other bills that may be pending in the legislature. But all of that is allowed. All of that is sanctioned by the Ethics Act. There's a specific provision in the Ethics Act that applies only to lobbyists, and it says that a lobbyist cannot be solicited for anything except a campaign contribution. That is probably the clearest provision that we have in the Ethics Act, and it is a strict prohibition about soliciting anything from lobbyists. So just remember that that is there. If you have questions about the limits of that, you can certainly ask us as situations may arise for you, but this provision is in there, and you need to at least have been told about it and know about it. You will hear people talk about de minimis value a lot. For years now, this idea that anything under $25 is allowed is pretty widely known with people inside and outside government. That is known as the de minimis amount. And people's understanding about what that means is generally correct. If it is under a certain dollar amount, then the law presumes that it's okay for you to give and it's okay for people to receive. That amount originally was $25. The Code of Alabama allows the Commission to increase that to keep up with inflation, and we did that 2 Decembers ago and increased it to $32. Knowing that you have the de minimis exception, I think, is incredibly helpful, because often in conjunction with events, you may want to give an item just as a token of appreciation for people's service, or as a welcome gift, for example. And having that de minimis exception as a separate exception to what you can give in addition to the event itself I think gives you a little bit of flexibility in terms of small items like that. I've seen people give flash drives. I've seen them give phone chargers that are fit within that amount, just in a gift bag that goes along with the reception. So just know that that de minimis exception is separate. Also know that as a lobbyist, you have separate meal allowances that you can spend. As a lobbyist, you can spend $25 per occasion or $250 annually on meals alone. Your principal can spend $50 or $250 annually on meals alone. So I'll point that out to say that there are numerous exceptions that cover the activities that, at least in my experience, most lobbyists want to be able to engage in, certainly during the session. You want to have events where you can educate policymakers about the issues that are important to you, and you want to do that in a relaxed setting that is also fun. And the code allows that, and we will approve those if you ask us to do it and it meets the requirements. I'm going to turn the program over to Cynthia Ralston at this point to talk about some specifics of the Act, and then I will circle back. Don't forget that if you have questions about anything that I've said, because I'm going through it at a rather fast pace, and because I'm not being interrupted for questions, I don't know what you're not getting and what you are. So if any of this is confusing or you have some follow-up you want us to go into, be sure to ask. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia.
Right? Yeah, okay. All right, so hi. Tom went over a fair amount of the stuff that I'm going to cover, but I'm going to talk about the specifics and where you can find it, okay? I'm not going to bore you with all the definitions except this one. Thing of value. He talked generally about it, but I guess I'm going to take this down here. I don't know why the feedback's so bad. Okay, if it's too much for y'all, just let me know. But all right, so thing of value is basically anything if you read this definition, right? So again, a gift, benefit, favor, service, gratuity, you can read through the long list of things, all right? Where understanding the definition of a thing of value lies is really in the 18 exceptions to the definition of a thing of value. As I said, there's 18, so I'm not going to cover all of them, but the ones that really matter to you all are the ones that Tom generally talked about. Is the three things: widely attended event, economic development function, and educational function. Educational function's just what you think it is. You go to a conference and you give people swag at the conference, you feed them, all of that. That's going to be acceptable generally, provided you meet this particular standards. I'm going to throw the code sections up here. You can look at those yourself. I'll talk about them a little bit, but really what you're going to want to do if you're going to throw an event is to let us know, and we can walk you through it. As he said, there's examples online, but pre-certification is really the best way to go about that. Pre-certification is not required. So if you have an event that nobody pre-certified, it doesn't automatically make it a violation of our act, all right? But the pre-certification gives everybody that assurance, especially public officials will look on our website. They used to call, but now that it's on the website, it's easier. They can go and see if it's pre-certified and whether they will go, because that often makes their decision about whether they are comfortable going is if we have already said it's okay. So what is a widely attended event? It's kind of an interesting definition, but if it's a gathering, really whatever that gathering is, at which it's reasonably expected that more than 12 people of individuals with a diversity of views or interests will be invited. So we don't know exactly where the 12 number came from, but it doesn't mean that if you have a group of accountants that it's not a diversity of views, because generally if you have 12 people in the room, they're going to have a diversity of views, even if they have the same occupation or, they're all Democrats or Republicans. Educational event, again, not going to read it all to you. It's if you go to a conference then and you're with a bunch of people, that's going to end up being probably an educational event. One of the issues is widely attended events can be outside of the state. Educational functions have to be in state for it to qualify as an exception to the definition of a thing of value. And I'll say that again to remind you, as I talk about all of these things, that's really what we're talking about, is your prohibition of giving a thing of value to a public official or a public employee. So how do you give them anything? Well, you go look at the exceptions to the definition of a thing of value, and we can walk you through that. So also economic development function, Not sure how many of you are going to participate in that, but there are exceptions. That is an exception to the definition of a thing of value. The primary difference between economic development and educational functions and widely attended events is that spouses are included in the definitional exception for educational functions and widely attended events, but not for the economic development function. So you wouldn't be able to pay for hospitality or meals and lodging and all of that for a spouse at an economic development function. So what is covered? As I said, we've got transportation and lodging, so actual and necessary expenses. If a public, for instance, I'll just use myself. So I'm going to teach for a principal and League of Municipalities, and they want me in Orange Beach, they want me to train at 8 a.m. Well, I live in Birmingham, and so I'm not going to get up at 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever time I would have to in order to get down there in time. And so they offer, hey, I can get you a hotel room, and they are a principal offering a thing of value, but those are expenses that are actual and necessary for me to participate. And so I was a speaker or panel participant, presenting information related to the agency, performing an appropriate ceremonial function, which I didn't, but cutting the ribbon sort of thing, and then appropriate for my official duties and representative function. Sure, that qualifies. So my actual and necessary expenses could be covered. Now, if it's a 6-day conference, I'm not attending the conference or 3-day conference, 4-day conference. I'm not attending any other part of the conference. I'm just speaking. They really can't get me a hotel room for all 4 days if I'm not participating. So I think probably if I could see you in the audience, I think y'all would nod and go, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Again, transportation and lodging, I put this up there because spouses are not included. So, and you're going to have to tell us what the lodging and the travel is. Are you flying somebody for $5,000 from North Alabama to South Alabama, or are you paying their gas mileage to get down to the conference? Because that may matter to the evaluation. All right, widely attended event, educational function, and economic development function. You can have hospitality. That's what you think about that is having hors d'oeuvres or an opening reception dinner at the beginning of a conference. As long as it's an integral part of the conference, that's fine. You can't have something that's not even related to the conference somewhere else that you pay for. For instance, a golf tournament that happens 2 days or the day before a conference that's not sponsored by anybody that's sponsoring the conference. Not all the attendees are invited. That's really just a standalone event. So the hospitality has to be an integral part of the event. Tom talked about this, so I can have a lobbyist buy me a meal for $25, or I can have a principal buy me a meal for $50. But I can't have a principal and a lobbyist buy me a meal for $75. So the limitation is really on the person you're getting the meal for. You can't stack those expenses. So this happens a lot. I mean, generally nobody's really worried about the $25 of a meal or $50. This did not change with the de minimis increase from 25 to 32. So these are separate allowances. All right, the de minimis is an individual exception to the definition of a thing of value, and then the meal exception is separate from that exception. So this is still just $25 and $50. So we talked about the pre-certification. This is really just a checklist. I'm not going to go read it to you, but essentially it's a checklist that is broken out from the definition of an educational event, right? So we're going to need to know what it is, what the agenda and the program is, what speeches are being given, panel participants, and then is it within, and we'll determine, whether or not it's within the official duties. Same thing with widely attended event. This is also a part of the definition of widely attended event in the first section of our act, of the Ethics Act, and then it can't be purely social. So it can't just be a golf tournament or golf event, fishing, that sort of thing. Okay, and then we're going to have to know what you're paying for. Are you reimbursing actual necessary expenses? As I said, are you flying them? Is the person driving getting reimbursed for mileage? What accommodations are you making? Are the accommodations different for the person, for the public official than they are for somebody else that you're paying for accommodations? That's going to matter. And who's coming, the public official, employee, or any spouses? Okay, so an integral part. It cannot be a standalone independent event. It must be in conjunction with the event. All attendees have to have the opportunity to go, and then sanctioned by sponsors of the event. So when you ask us, we'll be able to tell you if it's an integral part. The pre-certification has to be 10 days before the event. It's just, statutory construction, we read it as. No, hang on, there it is, I got it. Projecting. Whoa. Now I'm projecting. Okay, so little technical difficulty, we're back. All right, so it has to be more than 10 days before. We're not going to pre-certify anything if it's less than 10 days before, because we can't. Like I said, it doesn't make it a violation, it just means we can't. And go ahead and ask us in plenty of time so we can pre-certify. All right, we have a website where you can go and look at all of this. There's a tab for pre-certifications. You can look at everything we've ever done since we came online. And then we have some advisory opinions that Tom talked about, that they are formal advisory opinions, so they were voted on. Thank you. Okay, I'm back again. Hang on. Okay, I'm back again. All right, so this opinion, Advisory Opinion 2011-9, this is also on our website and accessible, so you can read all about it. This is the one that says you can't stack, so I can't get a principal and a lobbyist to go to lunch with me and get a $75 meal. One of them can pay for it, not both. 2016-15 is there's no de minimis lobbying. We have this come up every year, and I don't know what anybody in the audience is, or virtual audience is lobbying for, but it doesn't matter if you're lobbying for a small bill or a big bill, or you're doing a little bit of lobbying or a lot of lobbying. You still have to register as a lobbyist, okay? And if you're here, you've already registered a lobbyist, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but there is no de minimis lobbying. We've already talked about this. Sporting and recreational events are not permitted unless they're an integral part of the event. That is an exception to the definition of a thing of value. Also, this is if it takes place during the event, when no other conference activities are happening, and it consists of individuals attending the conference, and whether it is sanctioned may make it appropriate. All right, so y'all may or may not be aware yet that if you spend over $250 on a public official or a public employee or their spouse within a 24-hour period, you have to report that to us in a separate report, all right? You have to let us know that. That includes aggregating expenses. So if you have a bunch of sponsors for one event, and your amount of money that you've contributed is going to be spent for $250 or more for a public official, employee, or their spouse, you have to report that. Even though it's going into a big pot of money, you're still required to report that. All right, we have a statute that's called executive branch lobbying, but it's really just an extension of the definition of lobbying. So lobbying is defined in 3625.1, and then in 3625.1.1, they redefine lobbying, and it really talks about the lobbying the executive branch of government. But in there, it articulates that if you are trying to negotiate a contract with the state government, then that is lobbying. All right, so you would have to register as a lobbyist. In Section 1, they define lobbying, and there's an exception to lobbying saying if you're purchasing goods from government, if that's what you're trying to do is self-government something, then it's not lobbying. This may be a bit confusing, but that's how it works. So if you're doing that at the state level, you have to register. If you're doing it at the county or city level, you don't. And that's what this opinion says. It's 2018-07. So if it's local contracts or county contracts as opposed to state, then you don't have to register. All right, we have a website, and it's actually pretty robust. We have lots of information on the website that you will find very helpful. One thing I will say to you all, I guess you're probably all new lobbyists, when you go in to file your end of the year reports or going into the next year, please choose from the drop-down menu. It has the drop-down years, so you'll go in and you'll say, oh my gosh, you wouldn't let me file for 2003. Well, or for 2004, it's because you have to choose that year. Okay, that's a pro tip. All right, Tom has parting thoughts. And if y'all do have anything, Kayla File is fantastic. She will answer your questions. If she can't answer them, me, Tom, or Brian will. And thanks for coming, and I hope you're great.
Okay. I know that this is coming at you rapid fire, and I apologize for that. I feel like we were just kind of flying through this. So understanding that some of this may be new to you and it may be very confusing, let me try to summarize a few things. As a lobbyist, if you want to give anything to a public official or a public employee or a member of their family, it may be an invitation to something, it may be a gift. Just ask us ahead of time, because chances are it's going to fall within some exception to the general prohibition, or we can talk to you about how to structure it in a way so that you can comply with the act. So I think that's probably the easiest thing to remember, because what I know y'all worry about are not the discussions that you have, but the things that you offer or the perception that other people could have about things that they receive from you. So just ask us ahead of time so that we can give you a comfort level with what the parameters are about that. Second of all, remember the reporting requirement, and that applies to things that we have approved. So if you have an educational function or a widely attended event, even though we have said they're allowed by the Act, the Ethics Act requires you to disclose those expenditures that are in excess of $250 in a 24-hour period for the events that we have pre-certified for you. Where I have seen lobbyists get into trouble with outside interests, that might be the press or it might be just somebody in the public, is when you have pre-certified an event, but then you don't file a disclosure, and they make the assumption that you have had to have spent more than $250 in a 24-hour period because of where the event took place. It might be at the Grand Hotel. Somebody might look up what rooms cost there, and they're not going to go through the investigation to see whether you got a discounted rate. They will just simply look at the advertised cost for the room, and then they will assume that you didn't disclose, and they will usually contact us about that. Generally, what we will do is contact you about that and remind you that if you have any disclosures to make, you need to do it. It would help you out an awful lot if you would simply be on top of those disclosures and make sure that you're disclosing what you are required to disclose. Now, in the advisory opinion that Cynthia talked about, there are circumstances in which you can aggregate those expenses among everybody who is paying. What that generally does is it reduces the amount per person below $250. But the advisory opinion sets out the procedure for doing that and when it is allowed. So if you have a question about whether you can share that cost with other people and aggregate that expense in the way that I just described, you can either read the advisory opinion or simply ask us about it in an informal opinion, and we'll be happy to answer that question for you. Remember the pre-certification rule. That is by administrative rule that was passed in 2015 that requires the 10 days notice. A couple of points I want to make about that. I understand that often these deadlines will slip up on you. So if you are 10 days out and it is 4:30 in the afternoon and you realize that you have not asked for pre-certification, my advice to you would be that you send a quick email to the commission, preferably to me. My address is on the website, and just simply say you want to have the event on this date, that it's going to be at this location, and that you will follow up with me about the details. Every time that has been sent to me in that way, I have considered that to be filed within the 10 days. I'm going to need to get your follow-up information very quickly, but we just simply have to have the request within 10 days, and that's because we really don't want to be in a position where you ask on a Friday afternoon for an event that's taking place on Saturday and maybe nobody's in the office, or we don't have time to get enough information from you. That's why the administrative rule was passed. So I don't want you to be too panicked if you get up to that deadline and you think you have to prepare a packet to send us. You don't. You just simply have to make the request to us. So go ahead and get that in any way you can. If you've got my cell phone number, you can text it to me. I've had people text it to me, and I just convert it and just email it into the office so that we've got the request. So the point is just send up the flare, let us know what you want to do, but remember the 10-day rule. If you don't get it to us within 10 days, it doesn't mean you can't have the event. It just simply means that, that we can't pre-certify it as being in compliance with the Act. We will be happy to continue to answer questions for you about what the restrictions are, where the lines are, et cetera, et cetera. We'll do that up until the day of the event if you want us to. But for the act of pre-certification, we have to receive it within 10 days. Remember your quarterly filings, and remember that if you have someone who is submitting these on your behalf, please review them yourself. Put your eyeballs on it and make sure that what they're disclosing is accurate. We have had some issues, not in a while, but we did a few years back, where individuals had an assistant who was filing it who didn't disclose everything they needed to. And there was a member of the press who went through those quarterly filings because they are available to the public, drew some calculations, and raised an issue about it. It ended up getting resolved with an additional filing, but the lobbyist said, my assistant filed it and I didn't review it. I understand how that happens, and it's correctable, but it would just simply make it easier for everybody if you put in the work ahead of time to make sure that what's being filed is accurate. So that would be my recommendation to you, is to make sure that what's being filed is accurate. I would also advise you to be in close contact with your principal. Often there's a lack of communication between the principal and the lobbyist about expenses or disclosures, or even the authority to lobby. And that can cause some problems too. So keep in close communication with your principal as well. If you're lobbying, if you, for example, take on a new client, your scope of lobbying services changes, remember that you have to update your registration with us to disclose that additional client or that additional area of lobbying within 10 days. And this brings me to my last point. Where you can do yourself the most good is to stay in contact with Kayla in our office about everything involving your job if it interacts with ethics. So if you filed something and you need to make a correction, by all means, file an amended disclosure. Call Kayla and say something's coming in. Let us know. We will let you file. We want you to comply. We don't want you to be out of compliance. So just be sure to let us know that something's wrong and you need to update it. We encourage you to do that. And that's about all that I've got. So this will be a busy session. Remember that, again, if there are events that you want to host, if you've got questions about that, ask us about it. Rule of thumb, if you want to offer something to a public official, we recommend that you ask us about that ahead of time to make sure that there are no issues there. And if you have any follow-up questions after today's webinar, be sure to email them to us if you haven't already texted them in to us. So I hope that we see you during the session. Our doors are always open. So during the session, we're right down from the State House. Be sure just to walk down if you have any questions or you need to file something with us, or you've got general things that you would like to ask us. So otherwise, I have nothing else to bring out to you today. If you don't have any other questions, then I wish you a good afternoon and hope you're staying warm out there. And so anyway, good luck to you, and thank you for attending today.